This episode of Working in Music Sucks is brought to you by Plug & Alley's weekly recall newsletter. Get tips, tricks, updates on sales, and so much more weekly. You can find a link to sign up in the description of this episode wherever you're listening. Now, let's get to the show. Plug & Alley presents Working in Music Sucks, the show where we talk about what sucks about working in music so you don't have the same problems. I'm your host, John Maciel, and if you're a returning listener, glad to have you back. You can do us a favor and drop a like if you're watching this video on YouTube or leave a positive review on iTunes. We greatly appreciate it as it helps us reach more people that this show can benefit. And if you're a new listener, glad you're here. And in today's episode, my friends, we're going to talk about something pretty boring, but extremely important and also very hard to find information on for audio engineers on the internet. It's like whenever anyone asks this question, like no one knows the answer. And luckily, or unfortunately, depending on how you want to view the story, before I went full-time into audio, I had almost 10 years experience working in a bank and learning a lot of these beginning steps to setting up your studio as a business. So if you want to know how to do it the right way, always consult a professional tax, a CPA, all that fun stuff so that you do it properly for your situation. And this is going to be speaking to those of us based in the United States. And I would imagine it'd be maybe kind of similar overseas. Maybe not, maybe it doesn't translate 100%, but for the most part, I think a lot of this stuff is pretty basic everywhere, no matter where you're at. So with that said, the first thing, now in the States, we have something called a sole proprietorship, which means you're doing business as yourself as an individual, and you as the individual are liable for everything and anything. Now, there's a pro and con depending on how you look at it. Now, the best way to look at a sole prop is like if something were to go wrong and someone decided to sue your business, which means you as a studio owner, sole prop, they come after you and your assets, right? That's doomsday scenario. There's also LLCs, and I think I see more people often ask, like, when should I do an LLC? And I always say, personally, depending on the state you're in, there's always an annual fee for an LLC. For an LLC, if you're making 3 times what the annual fee is for your state, then it's time to become an LLC. Or if you just want to negate any responsibility for if someone comes after you for anything, you can set up the LLC. It's really, when you're starting out, it honestly kind of just doesn't matter in my opinion. But once the business is actually making like a good amount of money where it's like half your, like let's say you're working, if half your salary is now being made through your music stuff and you're almost like at the point where it is making your full-time music income. If you're halfway there, then I think it would be time to consider going LLCs to protect yourself in case anything were to happen. Now, after you decide how you're going to set up as either a sole prop or LLC, the next thing you're going to need in the States is an EIN number, which is an employee identification number. That's what you're going to use for the tax man and how to just file taxes. Sounds really lame and boring, and it is. But you want to have one of those. You don't want to use your social, especially in a sole prop. I like to keep everything separated. Makes it easier. So if like I'm opening a bank account or anything like that, I'm like, oh, I have an EIN. Use my EIN number. Just keeping things separated and nice and clean, which leads to the next one. Want a business bank account. I know a lot of people... it drives me insane. But a lot of people, when they're starting out, don't think about audio as like they think of it as like a side hustle, but not like a side hustle where it's a business. It's just like extra play money. When in reality, it's like, well, depending on how much you're making, the IRS is going to think very differently. So I've always been a very big advocate of having, as soon as you're going to take money from anyone in audio, have a separate bank account. Like separate that from your personal ASAP. Even if you're being contracted, you're a 1099 and someone's hiring you for rendering services for their companies, always have a separate bank account for all that income that's coming in. So it's easier to follow. If you have it just going to your personal, it can get really hard at the end of the year to figure out like, okay, what's what. If you have it going to a separate business account and then you can transfer that money into your personal account, it's a lot easier to track. Now, the one I recommend if you're in the States is an online bank called Novo, Novo Bank. It's free to set up an account as long as you have all your paperwork and your EIN and everything. And they're great. They're fantastic. They have something called reserves where you can put that money, you can put money away for taxes. And I also recommend that when you're starting out, it's really easy to get paid. Like, let's say someone pays you $500 to record a record or like a single, and you're super stoked at that 500, and then you make another 500 and another 500. Before you know it, you've made like $10,000 over a few months, right? Recording an artist. I'm always of the mind, whatever you make, throw 50% of that, like cut it in half and throw 50% into like a reserve account or a savings account for taxes next year, and you keep the other half, and that's your play money, your spending money, your gear money. I always cut everything right down the middle, 50%. And then if I don't have to use all that money for taxes the following year, awesome. Cool. It goes into business reserves for expenses and things like that, or just stays in the savings. But either way, have a nice little safety net just in case a rainy day happens. But so many audio engineers will be like, I owe so much. And I'm like, how much did you put away? Oh, I didn't put away anything. Well, yeah, you weren't preparing yourself for it. So keep that in mind. Again, a CPA is going to be better suited to answer a lot of technical questions. I'm not really trying to get into any of that. I'm just the basics of what you need going. If you've always wondered, like, what do I need to set up if I have my own studio business? Hopefully this answers. Another thing, a business credit card. So the reason for that is sometimes people will like to put things that they're buying for their studio on their personal credit card. And again, no. We want to separate all that. It's going to make things so much easier for expenses and tax season. Capital One has a pretty good basic business credit card. I can't recommend enough. I think it's great for like a beginner business card. The only other one, there's like a Chase Bank one that's pretty good, but they're all kind of the same. It really comes down to like percentage back per year. And sometimes they do like, if you spend $1,500 or something, bonus, you get like $100 or $200 bonus. Those are the ones where if like, you're going to buy, let's say a distressor or something that meets that number, I would apply for that, get the card. You already have the cash, you were going to pay cash for that thing anyway. So instead now what you're going to do is you're going to get the $100 or $200 credit. You're going to pay that towards the balance to bring that down, and then you pay the difference, and then you get to keep the $200 or $300 in your business savings or whatever. And then when you're making payments on the business credit card, never do it from a personal. Transfer that money to your business and make the payments from the business. Oh, again, keep everything separated. Next one is accounting and invoicing software. So you probably have heard like QuickBooks gets mentioned like so much. I don't necessarily think you need QuickBooks. There's a website, waves.com, not the plugin company, but if you type in like Waves, WAVES, and then invoice or invoicing, it'll take you to this platform called Waves. And it's like most of their stuff is free. I've been using them for like 6 years now. They're fantastic, but you can create invoices just like you would in PayPal. But what I really like about it is that if you send an invoice, you can set it up to where whoever you're sending an invoice to can pay with credit card directly through the email that they get sent with the invoice. So if they're like a one-off customer or something, or if like you're working with an artist and they don't have the cash, you can be like, do you have a credit card? Yeah, cool. Invoice them. It takes care of all that. And they have a lot of integrations and things like that in accounting, but they're fantastic for getting started. The next system you're going to want, there's actually two, but I'm going to separate them. So one is like product or project management. So you've ever seen like those like whiteboards in studio documentaries, and they have like guitars, bass, and the name of the songs, and they have X's and stuff. That's essentially what I'm talking about. I just think like doing the whiteboard thing is kind of old school because it means it only handles in the room. And in my experience, it's like I've worked in a situation where it's like I'm never doing everything 100% in one studio. It's like when I was in LA, I was very fortunate. Like we would do certain things at different studios. Excuse me. So I like to use Google Sheets. And maybe in the show notes, I'll link to what I would use for tracking and for like project management, a Google Sheet. But I would use a Google Sheet because what's cool about with the Google Sheet is that if me and someone else are working on a record, or if I go to a studio, I can publicly share that Google Sheet and send that link to anyone that's at the studio and just say, instead of writing the thing on the sheet of paper, use your phone and just mark it on that Google Sheet so it updates in real time. So we're not looking and hunting down that piece of paper. If it gets wet, if coffee gets spilled on it, something happens. But then I also have like that snapshot within the cloud on the Google Sheet cloud. And I can be like, okay, so at this studio, we recorded this, this, and this. So like within the sheet, you can have like different sheets at the bottom. So I can keep the whole album, or we would keep the whole album within one Google Sheet essentially, and be able to track like what was happening where, what was done. And instead of having like a whiteboard where things can get convoluted and messy, we would just have it in a Google Sheet, and it would be so much easier to manage everything. It was such a great system. But with the calendar, and we would also have a calendar system. I can't recommend Google Calendar enough. It's just great. So calendar system is essentially when you get to make what days you want to work and don't want to work, and what time slots. So what you could do, there's different ways of going about it. Like you can create a calendar system with like something like Calendly, where someone hits you up, they're ready to record, and you send them a link to your calendar, and you're like, okay, this is my calendar. Any dates that are open, you can book for like 7 days. Here's this code, and they can choose their week or whatever. And having a calendar system is just really happy, or a really great thing to do, so that everyone's on the same page. So basically, let's say you don't want to do that route. You just want to do it all manually, right? You look on your calendar, you're like, okay, here are the dates that we got. They tell you, okay, sure, here's the deposit. We want to do these dates. Get everyone's email from the band, every person's email. And then what you're going to do is you're going to create like a calendar within Google Calendar that has just that project or band's name on the calendar, because you're making a custom calendar. So it's like, let's say Apples and Oranges band, right? Within that calendar, you're going to mark the dates and the times in those dates, or the slots that everyone's going to be in the studio. And then you're going to link on the calendar. So like, let's say Monday through Friday, the third week of April is this band, Apples and Oranges. So you make one main event that Apples and Oranges in the studio all week. And you attach everybody's email to that, and you set up notifications so that they all get notifications and they all know. Like, you need to get everyone's email. Then what you do is you break down, okay, vocals, let's start with drums. Drums are going to be Monday and Tuesday. So then you go and you block out Apples and Oranges drum tracking Monday and Tuesday as a calendar event, what time, and then you link the drummer and whoever else needs to be there to that specific event. And then you do the same thing for any other days. But then when it comes to mixing and mastering, you block out that time too within your calendar. So you know, like, okay, this week is all recording, but the following week is like editing, first drafts of mixes. And then like you have a timeline, and the band is aware of the timeline. So many people just throw arbitrary dates out into like a text message or a Facebook message. And what happens is people forget. People are unreliable. They have their own lives. They have their own agendas. Shit happens, family stuff happens, and it's nobody's fault, right? So creating a calendar system like that is so helpful, so that everyone's on the same page and everyone knows what's going on, and there's no confusion. The next thing is what I would do personally is either create like a Facebook group chat, a text group chat, or even using something like a program called Slack or even Discord. Like create a group chat for everyone in the band too, so that all conversations moving forward are in this group chat, so that everyone knows what's going on. Now, whether or not people in the band read those messages, that's not on you. You sent the message to the group so everyone knows, so you're speaking to the whole band. You don't just want to have the conversations with the main person of the band, because you want the whole band to be in the circle. Now, if there's separate conversations that need to happen with a certain member of the band who's like the one that's paying or the head person, obviously you can still have those conversations, but you want to make sure like big messages like, all right, tomorrow we're doing drums, yada, yada, yada. Billy, see you there at this time. Like that needs to go to the group chat, so that everyone can see that and everyone in the band's accountable for it. If you send that to just like, say, the drummer, there are so many times when the drummer can delete that message and say, oh, I never got it. Then you show the band the message and then he can just say, oh, I never got it. That's really weird. I'll have to call my cell phone company. So essentially they're lying, right? Not everyone's going to be that shysty, but I have experienced where there are people like that. So sending it to a group chat, everyone sees that message, right? No, you can't lie when it's in a group chat. As simple as that. Next is a feedback system, meaning a way for people to give you notes. Now, I like using email because email in the States is very reliable method of record keeping, and the courts will deem. So if someone tries to screw you out of money or saying you said something that was not true or whatever, if it's an email form, the courts typically will accept that as a form of evidence if it were to get that far. Whereas if you're just doing like a Google Doc or something, that doesn't really count. So if you want to have like the best course of recourse for feedback, using email is best. And again, have the whole band attached to that email and set up, hey, one person needs to respond to this email in regards to like mix notes. And this one person is speaking for all of you. So just please make sure you all talk about any concerns or questions you have about the mix and then send it in the reply. And you keep that all in the thread. So it keeps everyone accountable as well. You're going to notice a common thing. Keep everyone in the conversation as much as possible. There are going to be people that hit you up on the side and you got to kind of like massage those interactions. But for the most part, you got to keep everyone. You want to create a system where they know that like there are no secrets. Like everything's open. It's way it protects yourself. And then two other things that I think are really important to do that I don't believe a lot. I'm one of few people that do this, but creating like a Spotify playlist of like everything that you've worked on that's been released, and then a YouTube playlist of everything that's visually come out that you've worked on too. So like music videos, singles, anything like that, put that in a YouTube playlist and have those playlists like in your phone notes ready to go to send to someone. Because whenever you're chatting with someone out in public or something like that, it's so much easier to just send them a link to like your resume essentially than try to have them go to like your website or take your business card. And plus, if you give them like a Spotify link, most people have Spotify, they can like jam those songs, right? So it's like creating like a mixtape for yourself. It's pretty sick. And the last one is having a website. Now, website's the very bottom for me because that one is, I personally don't know many people who got work from their website. It's always like word of mouth or going out, finding people, and then whatever they release attracts like their work. I think websites a lot of audio engineers really over focus on the website part. I do believe it's important, but I don't think you should like overwhelm yourself with it because in the end, your website, like you have to think like if you're looking for a mixer or a producer for your record, you don't go to Google and search, right? You go look at bands that you like, look at their videos, and you try to hunt down who worked on that stuff and see where they're at, and that's how you're going to decide on who you work with. So working on a website, if anything, using it to like you worked on a record and then crediting the band and then putting your info so it's easier for people to find you for like Google search crawls could maybe work. But most of the time it's like people find through like Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram and like All Music, things like that. Like wherever it's publicly posted is usually how bands are able to find people who worked on what. And if it's your local scene, it's word of mouth, right? So these are a couple of things to setting up your, modest studio, getting off the ground. Again, always refer to a professional CPA, people with way more experience than me when it comes to like, how about like, should I organize as an LLC or an S Corp, all that stuff, you want to talk to a professional. These are just really basic ways of getting your business up and running. And if I do end up sharing the project management Google Sheet, you will find it in the show notes. And that's it for this episode. If you found this episode helpful and know a friend who may benefit, please share it. Would greatly appreciate it. And if you just want to keep talking music and all things audio, there's a link to the show's Discord server in the description as well. And until next time, just remember, working in music sucks, but with what you learned on today's episode, it doesn't have to. Until next time, friends.